Welcome to the T.H.E. Tourism, Hospitality, and Event Podcast, brought to you by Tourism and Hospitality Management Seniors at Temple University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This podcast is student-driven. On this podcast, students apply the knowledge and experience that they have acquired from their time at the School of Sport, Tourism, and Hospitality Management to address present-day issues that have a significant impact within the industry. My name is Jessica, and I will be joined today with my colleagues, Isabel, Megan, Bridget, and Iquan. I would also like to thank Daniel Roper from the Union League of Philadelphia for coming on with us today. 2020 has undeniably been a year of unprecedented uncertainty. The tourism, hospitality, and events industries have incurred financial losses, closures, and operational adjustments. Industry professionals have faced numerous challenges amidst the pandemic, but we've also seen great displays of creativity, solidarity, and resilience. Today, we're going to discuss the specific intersection of hospitality organizations and live events, and how their relationships have changed during the coronavirus pandemic. To kick things off, I would love to hear from you, Daniel, about your role at the Union League and how your responsibilities have changed during the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. It's only been a couple years since I graduated, but a lot has changed. I didn't have to do a podcast, so good on you guys. I work at the Union League of Philadelphia, which is a private city club in Center City, Philly, just right south of City Hall there. I started there in 2013, when I was still in school as a busser. They have a few restaurants in the building itself. So I worked my way up from a busser to a server. And then when I graduated school, I was looking for a job in sport, which was where my degree was from in STHM, sport and rec. But I wasn't able to find anything, and I took an opportunity that they offered in banquet event operations. So I jumped on that for a couple years and continued to grow professionally there, and then was given an opportunity last summer to go to our satellite golf course down in Cape May Courthouse, New Jersey, and run the restaurant down there. But it's a much smaller operation, so it's a lot of carryover of banquet operations, restaurant operations, shared spaces, things like that. So I was back down there again this summer. I really love what I do down there. I think that is becoming what, I hope my career path to be, is to work on the golf course. But yeah, it's been a great time, great experience. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you again for joining us. It's been really interesting to see what's still open, what's happening in the industry with all the restrictions in place. In doing research on this topic, it's been so interesting to find out the different ways that hotels are utilizing their event spaces and rooms while restrictions are in place. According to a New York Times article written by C.J. Hughes, many creative initiatives are being implemented by hospitality organizations across the country. In cities like New York and Miami, hotels have collaborated with local and state governments to provide accommodations for vulnerable communities in response to the pandemic, whether that be for nurses, houseless people, or people that are just displaced and can't return home at the moment. The Great Wolf Lodge here in PA has created remote learning facilities for students taking virtual classes and has begun marketing micro weddings for their ballrooms. Other hospitality organizations have converted standard rooms to workspaces for business professionals who want to break from working from home. According to a member poll conducted by the Global Business Travel Association in November, 50% of companies reported that their employees were either somewhat willing or very willing to travel. One challenge that hotels will face during and post-COVID-19 is regaining consumer trust and comfort. Isabel, what do you think hoteliers and event professionals can do to rise to the challenge?
I think it's really important to consider what guests are looking for right now. In order to gain the trust of potential customers, it's important to be upfront and transparent about how you're offering your service while still making sure they feel safe and comfortable. For instance, I work at a franchise Hyatt hotel property that has changed dramatically since the start of the pandemic. We help guests feel safe by promoting online check-in and try to limit contact with guests throughout their stay. All of our staff are required to wear PPE and conduct sanitation walks every 90 minutes. In terms of our events, we've shifted to hosting smaller, more local events for nearby businesses. And when a client asks for food service, we only provide basic offerings such as coffee and prepackaged or personally packaged meals. Daniel, how is the Union League catering to their events at the moment? And have you noticed a shift in guest satisfaction due to the modified offerings?
Um, so it's interesting having the perspective of working in two separate locations, one in the city of Philadelphia, which is, I'm sure you guys are aware, is much more strict when it's coming to how it's handling event size, event capacity, types of events, things like that. In the city itself, it's been very difficult. Most of our staff has been furloughed or let go because we don't have really events right now, which is tough. And so the events that we have had, the biggest event before the most recent um, executive order from the mayor was no more than 50 people. And because we're a private city club, we're not really doing as much as some of the other chain hotels might be doing, just because we have a membership that pays for our services. So we're trying to service them as best as possible in creative ways. We've been doing a lot of online events, Zoom calls, things like that, where we have live music, but it's being played over the Zoom, virtual happy hours, things like that, to varying degrees of success. I know our membership and a lot of the feedback that I've gotten, they want to be able to use the facility. They want to be able to go and do things in person, but they are aware that that's not entirely possible right now. On the golf course, we were lucky because we have a lot of outdoor space. So we were able to repurpose a lot of our events to outdoor events. Even for a golf outing, the sit down dinner afterwards, while normally inside, just went outside, and it was a lot easier, and guests were happy to still have the events. So it was a lot of just maximizing what we had. And then again, our membership was really just happy to be out and doing things. So they didn't really mind too much that it wasn't to the same level, or the food options weren't the same. They're just happy to be out and doing things and to use their club. So that was really good, and lucky on our part that we had an understanding membership, as opposed to someone coming in expecting one level of something and not understanding, hey, we're in a pandemic, can't really do that anymore. But yeah, it's definitely been interesting to go through all that.
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that. Working in the hotel, people want the same level of service, but some things, just like certain amenities like our fitness center and our pool, they can't be open for seemingly obvious reasons, but people still don't understand. And then going off of the virtual changes, the world has seen a major shift into using remote technology. And according to Forbes.com, virtual events have shifted to be one of the most popular modes of communication for this year. Forbes mentions multiple benefits to virtual events, such as having low cost, advancing technology, and increasing importance of the attendee experience. Bridget, how do you think this trend is affecting live events, and do you think this trend will continue?
Yeah, so that's a great question, especially with the pandemic still going on. People are finding creative ideas to hold events in the virtual setting. In my opinion, I think that virtual events are hurting the live event industry. I say this because people are seeing how cheap virtual events are and how they might be able to continue to hold them virtually instead of in person. Another thing that I think is concerning is the amount of employees that could be laid off by this. Virtual events only need little to no staff. With that being said, virtual events could severely damage the live events industry if virtual events continue to be a trend. Also, in my opinion, I think that that would determine how long the pandemic lasts and when people will feel safe and comfortable to attend in-person events. You'll see people who will have no problem going in person, but there'll be a lot of unknowns if there'll be enough people to attend in-person events that will allow the event to gain profits. Therefore, it will be up to the event planners to implement the proper procedures that will help people feel safe when the pandemic is over and the vaccine is approved. Also, after speaking about how virtual events cost employees less money, and it also doesn't cost an attendee anything unless they need to pay to register, I'm curious to know, Megan, do you think the price of events would decrease after the pandemic is over?
Yeah, thanks. That's definitely the question the whole event industry is wondering right now. From the looks of it and the research I've conducted over the past few months, I've mainly read that event prices will either stay the same or increase to compensate for the revenue lost throughout this pandemic. In my opinion, guests who love to attend music festivals and concerts and all these live events are itching to go back to get that live experience and feeling again, and they will be willing to pay these higher prices to get in. Although I do fear that the attendance of these events will be lower due to the underlying fear of getting sick. This fear may take years to overcome as we've been in this pandemic for quite a while. We've all been in quarantine for so long. Daniel, what are your thoughts on post-pandemic fear when events reopen? Do you think guests will still have this underlying fear?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of helping to define the new normal. I think in events and event planning, you need to understand that you are going to have guests that, might be sort of our demographic, that are a little younger, that don't have necessarily as many underlying health issues, that are more ready to get back into normal society pre-COVID, and go out and hang out with their friends and go to music festivals and bars and events and sports and things like that. But a lot of, again, specifically looking at the demographic of the Union League, a lot of our membership is older. There's a lot of the expendable income in our industry comes from a demographic that is currently more on edge, that is in their 40s, 50s, 60s, that might have a health condition or things like that. So all we can do in the event planning stage and the execution of events is our best. We can put out as much information as like, hey, we got a new HVAC system that we can cycle the air out of the building in 25 minutes. Staff is wearing masks and a face shield. We're wearing gloves. We're not cross-contaminating. If someone was sick, they're out for 2 weeks. We can control the controllable, as I like to say to my staff, but we can't control how that makes people feel. And I think that is going to be the struggle, is while in a few years with the vaccine and people will be going back to normal, there's going to be the residual effect of, well, what if it happens again? Are we doing everything we can? So it's going to be interesting to see how everything shifts with the times. But I think it's just going to be a matter of doing everything you can, informing your patrons that you're doing everything you can, and it then just falls on them to make that decision of if they are comfortable enough to come out and do it. And that's all you can really do and hope for.
Defining that new normal, as you said, or so is gaining the customer trust will be a big part of the challenge of increasing the attendee turnouts of events, or trying to just get them to come to events and getting back to pre-COVID performances. Another big factor that we wanted to point out that's also impacting attendee turnout in these events is staying within legal parameters set by governmental agencies. So this can include agencies set at the local, state, and federal level, such as local health and sanitation, the Center for Disease Control, and OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, also known as OSHA. In Pennsylvania alone, we saw that the governor has placed some stricter enforcement on things such as mask wearing, which is now required both indoors and outdoors. Out-of-state travel with requiring of tests 72 hours of entry into the state, and as well as restaurant and hotel occupancy levels, social distancing, even gathering limits, as you mentioned before. So individuals or businesses that fail to comply with these regulations could be fined up to $300 per each event. And there's been a lot of backlash from operators of the hospitality sectors stating that they feel as though it's unfair because many customers are able to go into other services or service providers and still operate with businesses that they're not impacted, such as shopping at a grocery store or Target or something like that. These businesses aren't as impacted by the restrictions and regulations. And then I have an example of specifically how restaurants in New York were impacted by a regulation as such. In New York, over 300 restaurants joined together to file a class action lawsuit against the mayor for $2 billion in damages to the city's indoor dining ban, which is directly impacting restaurants and their revenue. So, in your opinion, would you say that these regulations are actually helping the sector or hurting the sector? And that question was for Daniel. I'm sorry.
It's a very interesting question. Again, my experience, and I'm lucky enough to be where I work, that we have a base that's not going to go away. I do think with these restrictions that you're going to see a lot of smaller and newer restaurants, event places, things like that will probably go under, which is unfortunate because they haven't established themselves yet. They haven't built up a revenue base that they have something to survive on. It's going to be very interesting, again, even in a state by state basis, to see how the industry is going to be affected. You look at Florida right now, where kind of seems like there are no rules, for better or for worse. They're still having events. I watched the football game the other night. There were like 30,000 people in that stadium. So a state like that, where they're being a little more lax, is going to be better. So, do you see industry professionals starting to move to places like that? And how is that going to shift everything? It's tough to sort of say. Short term, I think it's definitely hurting. Long term, I wonder if it's going to sort of help those that are established or that have loyal customer bases, if they're still going to be fine. But it's so hard right now. We're going through a presidential change too, and how is that going to affect everything that's going to go on with the regulations? So it's very much a situation where even I sit here and I'm like, all right, what is today going to bring? What is tomorrow going to bring? And you have to be ready for everything as if it were to happen yesterday. It's a very weird thing to go through, and it's just hard. And again, I'm lucky enough to be in a place with an established membership that is continuing to pay their dues throughout this pandemic. So there's still a building, there's still a job for me when all this is over, which I'm very blessed to have. But that's not the same for a lot of places, and it'll be interesting to see if corporations step up. Places, I'm just using it as an example, like the fast food places, right? McDonald's, Burger King, they're not going anywhere. Grubhub's still a thing. People are still ordering, and those places are lucky enough to be able to stay open. I personally would love to see them that know that they're going to be okay, try to give back to those, the mom and pop Italian restaurant in the corner of your small town that they're not going to be able to do it. I would love to see the industry kind of step up and support each other. And I know it has, but I'd love to see it, continue to do so throughout all of this.
Thank you.
Awesome. So as this podcast comes to an end, Daniel, if you don't mind, we have one more question directed towards you and the industry and looking towards our future. We are all seniors right now, just about to graduate. With entering the hospitality and events industry at such a strange and unknown time, what is the best advice you can give to us while you've been working hands-on in the industry right now?
That's a great question. I think right now, in talking with a lot of my friends that are going through similar situations as me in hospitality, and again, a lot of them work at the Union League, so it's a little different for us, but don't pigeonhole yourself would be my first advice. If you want to come out of school and you want to go into event sales, fine. Don't make that your only skill set. Right? Don't go into job interviews and be like, well, I'm not interested in doing this because I really want to do sales. Right now, it's all about, and I'm sure you're sick of hearing your professors say it, right? Get your foot in the door. Do whatever you can to get your foot in the door. If you have to take an operations job, take it, because that's actually what you learn there will be valuable when you're selling events, because you'll understand how it works, because you've executed it. If you have to take a restaurant manager job just to get into a group, right, like Scholson or something like that, if you want to do events for them, but they need a floor manager in the restaurant, don't turn down that opportunity, because you're going to take the skills that you learn there and take it on into what you really want to do. So that's sort of what I would say is don't pigeonhole yourself. Learn as much as you can. Become like a Swiss Army knife for everything in the industry, because the more you can offer, keep in mind you're going to be also competing with people that are probably overqualified because they've been let go. And so it's showing that you're willing to take on that little bit of extra work, because from my experience, I'm sure that person is not going to want to, be in the dish room until 10 o'clock at night helping scrub pots and pans as the manager, because they just came from a nice cushy sales job. You know what I mean? So that would just be my advice, is don't be afraid of the work. It's going to come, but just make yourself as open to all opportunities as possible.
Well, thank you again, Daniel. This has been such a great conversation, and we really appreciate your time today. So thank you for joining us for this edition of the T.H.E. podcast, brought to you by the Tourism and Hospitality Management Seniors at Temple University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.